This is the Orca Boat Shop and my name is Rod. So we're working on the Acorn Dinghy. It's the 11'9" version, a little sailing dinghy. This is episode number 2 in the full long series of building this little dinghy. And in this episode I'm going to cover laminating up the inside and outside stem and building the transom. The plans show the inside and outside stem drawn full size. So now I'm just going to create a mold in which I can glue up these laminations. Looks like there's 6 laminations for the inside stem and outside stem. They're done separately. Going to glue up the inside laminations first on the mold, let that harden, clean it up, and then I can glue up the outside laminations. I suppose I could probably do them both at the same time. We'll see how that goes. So just as I've done with the other forms, all the main forms, I put carbon paper under here and I'm just going to trace out. Now I can draw, an extended straight line up in here. I want to have the form a little oversized. It makes it a little easier to bend the wood if you've got a little extra around the ends. See how that turned out before I undo the pins. And there we go. Seems to me the fastest way to do this is to glue these blocks down is to just use some CA glue, crazy glue basically. Put a little hardener on there. Now I just want to get these in place to hold until I can drive some screws in from the other side. As I get around the corner here, I just want to get some blocks a little bit closer together so that I can get as many clamps in there as possible. Now that the mold is made for the stem, this is the inside edge of the stem. I'm just going to rip up some mahogany and it'll all be bent and laminated around the form in this fashion. I've cut a piece of mahogany about 43 inches long, which is going to be more than long enough. And now I need to rip this piece into 1.5 inch wide pieces and then flip that piece and rip off some very thin strips so that I can bend it around my form. I will need enough laminations combined to be 1.25 inches, so accounting for the fact that we've got the saw curve, I may get them out of these 2 pieces here. We'll just see. Now, I don't want to have to steam the pieces, so I'm going to try and cut these as thin as possible, or probably around 5-30 seconds or so, and hopefully we'll just give a see and see if they will bend around the form without breaking. So before I cut any more, I'm just going to take this over the mold and see how it bends. So the question is, will that bend around there? Not very simply. So I think we need to go a lot thinner than that. Now I might be able to get these stacks to when clamping, or I can heat them up. I don't want to have to steam them. That's going to be another day of steaming and waiting for it to cool. I'll be gluing this up with epoxy, and I don't really want epoxy sticking to my form. So, simplest way to do that is to wrap this very well in packing tape. The red tuck tape works very well as well. but that is much harder to get that glue off once you've stuck that stuff down. The most important aspect of gluing up some thin laminations around a curve like this is preparation. So we've got the blocks in. I've got my packing tape on here. I've also got a bunch of blocks here that have packing tape on that I've used quite frequently. The idea being is that I may just want to apply equal pressure to the stack when it's all being bent around, because if I'm using certain things I may just be pushing in here but causing bows and bumps in other areas. So I've got all my clamps ready. I'm now ready to apply some epoxy to all the laminations and then glue them around here. I've mixed up some West resin with a 205 faster hardener. I've added a bit of thickening powder to it and actually added some sawdust, which I just tend to save from my belt sander when I am sanding certain kinds of wood. I'm just trying to get it a bit darker. I mean, there shouldn't be really any glue line, but I do want it to be kind of close to the mahogany color. It's thin enough that it'll run and still soak into the wood. And then I have just cut down a chip brush here, disposable brush, makes it a bit stiffer, and I can just pour this out and spread it around. Alright, I think I've got them saturated enough. Now I'm just going to stack them up. So I had extra laminations. I just used the thinnest ones I could find, with the total number adding up to the thickness of the 1.25 inch. Now we're going to end up squeezing out quite a bit of glue in here, so what I like to do is squeeze these together by hand and just wipe off the excess right now. It's going to be a lot easier to do that now before it sets up and you've got a lot of scraping to do to get rid of that extra epoxy all over the surface. More will likely come out, but I can clean off that once the clamps are on. Then we'll take it over to our mold and start to clamp it down. Just going to work my way from one end to the other, and I can use these quick grips, which are nice when you're one-handed, to be able to bend pieces of wood while using your other hand to hold things together. I'm likely going to want more clamps around this corner here. I like to use the quick grips because I can just sort of extend them out and then they just start to bend this in. It's important that you don't try to just pull the whole clamp in all at once, because it may just crack at that point. So it's kind of working this in a little bit here, a little bit there, and we just keep clamping and pulling and pulling. Then I can switch over to an F clamp because I need those quick grips to pull things in. Now this is a lot extra long than we need. It's probably a cut off here and cut off on there, but that gives me a little bit of extra clamping down the ends. I didn't really need that block. Now what I need to do is make sure that these are all down on the table. I don't have any extra wiggle room as far as thickness goes, so I want to make sure these are all down evenly on the table. Could have made these a little bit thicker this way in case there's a little bit of offset in some of these pieces, and then I could have just trimmed it on the table saw to the exact 1.5 inches, but think we're going to be good here. Just trying to get the epoxy out of there without getting it all over the bars of my quick grips there. Otherwise that'll be another cleaning job. So using this little stick, I can get in there and scrape it off as best as possible, and then gently just wipe it off in a rag. While the epoxy is setting up on the inside stem, I can laminate up and glue up my transom. So my goal here is to lay this up with 4 pieces of mahogany, and we need it to be at least 18 inches tall. So 18 by 4 is 4.5 inches per board, and those boards need to be at least 28 inches long to make the full transom. So I've got my board here. I'm just going to cut up some 28-inch pieces, a little over 28 inches, and then rip them into 4-inch pieces. I'll start by cleaning up the edge of both of these pieces, and then I have a nice straight edge to cut my 4.5-inch boards from. Now I can reset my fence for 4.5 inches. I've cut and planed my boards to the 7/8 thickness and 4.5 inch. The question is whether I should cut a spline down the center here of both pieces and sort of act as a reinforcement. The purpose of that really is, well, it increases the gluing surface, but it prevents sort of misalignment. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And maybe in a larger transom, we're just trying to prevent any cupping, i.e., getting these glued together. I don't think I'm going to worry about that. I think I'm ready to go by just gluing these 4 pieces together with my clamps. I'm all set to glue up the transom. Mixed up another batch of epoxy. First, I'm going to brush on the surfaces with some epoxy without it being thickened, just to make sure that the wood can soak up what it wants. I have also put packing tape on the bar of the clamp itself. Epoxy doesn't really stick to it, but just less cleanup later. So I'm doing it on one surface of each board. The middle boards will need it on both surfaces, both edges. We're just going to give this a minute to soak up. So I have done a dry run on this and clamped it all together. The edges are very clean. I don't have any gaps. I don't have any, bowing of the wood, whatever, that needs to be put under great amount of pressure to pull together, because I'd be worried about that wanting to come apart as the wood gets wet. So these 2 pieces don't need any more epoxy, but these 2 need the other side done. Then I would just take a little of the epoxy and thicken up just a little bit to fill the gaps between these 2 pieces. So I've mixed in some silica. You'll notice I've got my mask on when using that. Stuff is super light, floats up in the air, and you really don't want to be breathing that. So until it's mixed up, definitely want my mask on. So I'm going to put it on all mating surfaces now. I really only need to put it on one side. I don't need to put it on both mating surfaces, but Both need that epoxy on there to soak in. We just don't want to starve the joint by not having enough epoxy in there as the wood soaks it up. Now I did mark a center line on each of these boards so that I can line these up nicely down the center line and not have you know, these offset and then end up not being big enough to actually make the transom out of it. So this just, you know, line them up there. Just going to crank these down a bit. Just tap these over. I mean, it's probably not crucial, but since I've drawn the center line down there, I might as well line them up. It's just so when I tighten one of these and then the other, they want to slide a little bit. And of course, I want to make sure that they are flush with each other. These boards should be down flush. And to make sure they stay flush, I'm going to add some cauls. So these have also got packing on them. Put one on top, one on the bottom. And I should be able to just lift this up and pull these together. That's going to ensure that these 4 panels are flat to each other. Next morning I just took apart both the inside stem and my transom. You shall see. Just as I've done for the inside stem, it's time to laminate up the outside stem. Now this time I'm going to start in the middle here and just clamp this down. There were a few pieces in the middle there that are a little bit thicker, so I am making sure that they are in the middle of the stack or on the inside edge of the stack, so that you know, I don't end up breaking them on the outside edge. Second thought, because it's so slippery, I think I will just start on the end like I did on the last one. Now I've got a few strips inside here that are a bit shorter, but that's okay. I'm going to have enough, just enough. Nope, not going to get in there with that clamp. Clearly see that I'm going to need some more packing tape in there before I get going. It's the next morning, and we're just going to take all these clamps off here. And this is the time that I always worry that if I haven't prepared the mold well enough, that this sucker is going to be stuck to the plywood or something. So let's have a look, see how well I have prepped this form so that they don't stick together. Oh, beautiful. Like a charm. There we have it. Inside and outside stem, perfectly formed. If you want to follow along with this whole build, do consider becoming a subscriber and maybe hit that like button.